Gemini Man is directed by Ang Lee, and this movie follows a highly trained assassin named Henry Brogan. He is one of, if not the best in the world, but after he uncovers a malicious plot from the American government, a young clone of himself is tasked with killing him. A bit of a disclaimer before I actually start this review, but this movie was filmed in 4K at 120 frames per second, and the screening that I saw this movie at this evening did not show this movie in that format. So although I am not a big fan of this style of filmmaking, I did want to let you guys know that I didn't see this movie in the exact format that Ang Lee and the other filmmakers intended for us to see it in. But yes, visionary director Ang Lee is back with a film that has been in development hell for about 20 years now. I mean, you go all the way back to the 1990s, this film has gone through multiple different actors and directors, names like Mel Gibson, Clint Eastwood, Nicolas Cage. But this film was really unable to exist due to limitations of technology, which actually brings us to where we are today, where we see de-aging technology all over movies, so much to the point that it actually seems like it's kind of like a piece of cake. And although the technology put on display at points in this film is incredibly impressive, it doesn't really mean much if the story that this movie is trying to tell isn't compelling, which unfortunately is the case for Gemini Man. In fact, I found this movie to be pretty terrible, if I'm being honest. This film, almost at every turn, is filled with expository dialogue that I found to be incredibly clunky. There are multiple scenes in this movie in which our lead characters are fed information that they need to know in order to propel this movie forward. And for the life of me, I can't really think of a reason why this was done. The story that this movie tries to tell doesn't really need to be that complicated. Instead, this movie chooses to take all of these avenues and introduce all of these characters who don't really amount to much, again, just apart from telling the leads what they need to know. And speaking of which, the lead character of this film, Henry, he's not really someone that I found to be particularly compelling. Yes, there are some strong elements of this film where we have this character interacting with the younger clone of himself, talking about the past, the future, his destiny. And I actually did really enjoy those elements, except I can't really tell you much in the way of this character's personality. Yes, he is the best assassin in the world. Yes, he does actually feel remorse for the things that he has done, but I can't really tell you what kind of a person he is. There are scenes where he is laughing and he is smiling like we would expect Will Smith to do in a movie like this, and then in the next scene he is cold and bitter and dejected, really for no real rhyme or reason. And unfortunately, one of the biggest downfalls of Gemini Man is that if you gave me $500 to guess who directed this movie, I don't think that there's any way I could actually do so. This film is lacking almost entirely of a vision, which, considering who directed this movie, that's a huge bummer. Because love him or hate him, Ang Lee is a visionary filmmaker, and the fact that this movie is so thoroughly and completely uninteresting and unremarkable is pretty criminal. On a visual level, this film is completely flat. The color palette, the lighting, the blocking, all of it is so uninteresting to look at. There's a scene in this film that takes place in a spa that I found to be particularly guilty of this. The way in which it's filmed is really bizarre, not in a unique or an interesting way. They just make some really strange decisions. But as I did mention before, there are a lot of really strong visual elements in this film as well, particularly with the de-aging effects that are put on display with this movie, which at times are really jaw-dropping. There are scenes in this movie in which we have these two characters fighting each other. Their faces are right next to each other, which to me actually conveys that the filmmakers are almost baiting the audience to find differences or find mistakes in the two of them. And considering that you really can't, I find that to be particularly impressive. But you may notice that I am saying at moments these visual effects are impressive, because unfortunately for this movie, there are other scenes that I found to be really horrendous. There are plenty of moments in this movie in which the way that the clone moves I found to be really rubbery and bouncy, and it actually reminded me of the Neo versus Agent Smith fight in Matrix Reloaded. One scene in particular is really guilty of this, and it shows the two of them fighting with a dirt bike, and it is really tough to watch at points. But the most egregious example of this in this film is towards the end of this movie, and it features some of the worst special effects effects that I have seen in a major motion picture this year. I mean, this is on par with that creepy ass baby in Twilight. And it is really unfortunate that I did find Gemini Man overall to be incredibly lacking in a lot of ways. The dialogue in this film is filled with exposition. I found the characters to be incredibly inconsistent, and the narrative, the story that this movie tries to tell, is overly convoluted. And although yes, the effects in this movie are at times jaw-dropping, they don't really excuse what came before it, and they don't really redeem Gemini Man in really any way. So did you guys see Gemini Man? What did you think about it? Leave your thoughts and opinions down below. And as always, guys, thank you so much for watching today. I hope you liked today's video, and if you did, you can click on the link down below and subscribe to my channel to see more movie reviews and movie related things. I guess thank you so much for watching, and see you next time.